Hi guys, so in today's video I'm going to show you how I build these miniature telescopes. I actually built this telescope in my last video, which was building Professor Okio's stargazing tower. And in that video, to save time on the length of the video, I didn't show how I built this, and instead I just kind of cut to basically a finished product. And someone had left a comment asking if I could possibly please do a tutorial of how I built it. Now, tutorials aren't my typical kind of video, so please bear with me on that. But whilst I was building that room, I actually hit the milestone of 2,000 subscribers, that's huge. And so I thought, for me to celebrate that milestone, I will combine showing how I built this telescope, and at the end of it, I will give that away to one of my subscribers. So if you would like to own the telescope which I'm going to be building in this video, all that you have to do is make sure that you are subscribed to my channel, like the video and leave me a little comment. And then on the 11th of May of this year, 2024, I shall pick a name out at random and I shall post that product out to you. So with all of that being said, let's just crack on with it. Okay, so to make the front end of this telescope, I'm actually using these little wooden bobbins. Now, I've had these bobbins in my craft stash for I don't even know how long now. I bought them from the Range UK, and I have had a look online and you can actually still buy them from the Range. They come in a pack of 22 and they are £1.29. I can't even tell you the amount of times when I've been having a clear out that I've looked at these little bobbins or spools and thought, right, I'm going to chuck you away, but for some reason I've kept them. And for the first time, they became so useful for this project. And the reason why they're useful is because they also have that round shape as well as the cylindrical shape. Not really quite sure how I was trying to say that, but if you know what I mean. Now, the whole point of these telescopes is that you can really use anything that you have around. So here I am using a 3D printed water bottle that I've got lying around, and this piece here is a 3D printed piece of pipe work, and they're just lying around not really doing very much. And so I thought, as I was going around looking at things and putting things together, seeing how they work, that I thought that these work kind of perfect. But you could honestly use anything for this. You could use straws, dowels, anything basically which is cylindrical. You could also just paper quill a size and just gradually make it larger. This part here, which I'm using for the base of the telescope, is actually a polystyrene handle for cake pops. This piece is going to be the eyepiece, and so I'm just making a mark. I don't really have an exact measurement for this. I don't have any exact measurements for any area of this build, to be honest. And what I'm doing is I'm making a cut at 45 degrees. Then when you angle the piece, the larger piece, that then gives you a perfect angle from, I don't know what angle that is. Would it be a 90-degree angle? I guess. And then that just helps them join up perfectly. And then I then cut a 90-degree cut from that piece of styrene. To glue these two pieces together, I'm going to use a plastic cement glue, which is for model building. This glue kind of, I think, melts the plastics together in a way, but the grab on it is pretty much instant. It's fantastic. It doesn't work on every plastic. For example, I can't glue this to the piece of plastic resin piece which I previously 3D printed. I do have to use some glue gel for that, but styrene to styrene, it is fantastic. Here, I do need to try and make sure that I'm getting this as even as I can, because on the black 3D printed piece, you see that it has a bottom piece coming down, and it is so easy for me to get this in a kind of a wonky fashion. For me to create the rest of the rings, we shall call it, and make it look more like a cohesive piece, I cut some paper strips in 1/8 of an inch, and then I'm gluing those down using Aleene's tacky glue. Now, if you've seen any of my previous videos, you know how much I love this Aleene's tacky glue. I do, however, don't love how fast it comes out of the nozzle when you have it in the bottle. The bottle's great because it sits upside down, and this glue really is amazing glue. Like, it grabs instantly. But for things like this, I do need it to be precision tip, so I just decanted that into these small plastic bottles. That then keeps this as neat as possible, which for me is important because I am actually a really messy crafter, and I really don't like having sticky glue on my fingers. And then for the end of the bottle, I'm adding another strip. Again, this is just a 1/8 of an inch strip of paper, and I'm just using regular print paper to do this. As I'm wrapping the paper around, I don't have any like preconceived idea of how thick I want these rings to become. I'm just wrapping it around until I feel like it looks like it could be the correct thickness. Then once I reach a thickness that I like, I'm trying to make sure that I end that round on the bottom end of the telescope, because we don't want to see that join from either side of it, so I'm trying to get it down to the bottom as best as I can. My wrapping technique wasn't absolutely perfect, so I'm using some precision tweezers just so that I can even out those rings a little bit. For the eyepiece, obviously that piece is very small, so I wound and glued up some paper on a longer piece of the styrene tube, and then I was able to place that on top. And as I'm placing it, I don't want it to sit completely flush with the top of that eyepiece. I need it to have some depth to it. To glue that into place, I'm just putting Aleene's tacky glue directly inside, and this is a hollow tube, so I'm filling in the hollow tube as I go. When the glue dries, that's going to be a pretty solid base, and later on I do need to fill that with resin, so I do want to make sure that it does have a cavity inside. The strip which I'm applying now, I cut down at 1/16 of an inch. If I was to have a 1/8 at both ends, I feel like that could just look a little bit too clumpy. So looking at the end where the lens is, I was trying to figure out how I was going to create this in a way that anybody could do it. In my original telescope, I cut a ring out of my laser cutter, but for the purpose of this, I do realise that not everybody has a laser cutter or even a cutting machine of any kind. But what I did was I took one of those 1/8 of an inch strips of paper, and I found something which has a slightly smaller diameter than the end of my bobbin. I then wrapped it around a few times until the outer diameter became the same or very close to the tip of the bobbin. Once that was cut down to shape, I did put it back onto the pen just so that I could give everything a firm going around again to make sure that it was fully round, and then I used those precision tweezers to make sure that everything sat flush. Once I was happy with that, I then glued everything into place with Aleene's tacky glue. To fill in the hole on this side of the telescope, I took a small circular die cut and I glued that into place. Again, covering everything down with Alien's tacky glue, just to make sure that everything was really secured down, because on this end I will be filling this with UV resin later on too. So that is the basic shape of the body, and like I say, you really can use anything as long as they are going down in size. You can use any materials. What I'm doing now is I'm putting in a hole at 2 mm, and this is going to hold what will be the, can we call it an axle maybe? I don't really know. But basically I need something which is going to allow that telescope to move up and down and pivot. And to create the cradle for that, I'm using a material called Craftex. Now this isn't leather, it isn't really a paper. It's actually called like a paper leather, but it is very strong. You can tear this, you can sew this, you can put this in the washing machine. It looks like leather and it acts like leather, but it's completely vegan. So I just so happen to have these tiny 2 mm eyelets lying around. You really don't need to use these. I'm using them for mainly decorative purposes. But you know, the actual telescope doesn't actually really move, so there's no real worry of wear or tear there. So if you do decide to make one of these, you really don't need to have those eyelets. You could actually just cut out a small ring, or find something which is a small ring, and just put it on as a decorative piece, and I don't think you'd really know any difference. Earlier on, I made a hole in the bottom as well to hold this cradle into place. And I didn't get it as central as what I could have, or as what I should have anyway. But I had to create that third hole in the middle. Now, to create the part which holds this into place, I'm using a regular toothpick, and then I'm gluing this into place using super glue. And I also want this to set and cure with this cradle part at a slight angle, because I want the telescope, I don't need it to be, you know, completely flat. I want it to look slightly risen, and obviously this telescope doesn't really move up and down. Next, I am super gluing in a toothpick which is going to go in perpendicular at the bottom. And again, when I am gluing this into place, I'm making sure that the telescope sits slightly tilted upwards. Then once that's done, all I need to do is clip off those extra little pieces of the toothpick, and this is basically the body now complete. I was gifted fairly recently by a colleague a small bag of Lego bits, and it just kind of sat in a drawer, kind of forgotten about. And then when I was making the first telescope, and I was trying to think of little bits and pieces that I might have to build this, I came across that bag of Lego, and this piece is perfect for a small handle. Now, if you were going to make one of these, you do not need a Lego piece like this. You know, you could use a bead at one end, a piece of wire, and then a very small bead at the other end. I think that would look just as good. And for the next piece which I'm making now, this is just a wooden bead and one of those 2 mm eyelets. I don't feel like this is serving any real purpose to any real telescope in real life. Maybe it's decorative, maybe it is some sort of weight, I don't know. I'm just kind of, I made this thing up as I went along. Now, for the table part, I did cut mine out on a laser cutter, but if you are making one of these for yourself, this is how you can do it. If you have dies or a circle cutter, you can cut out the material that you're using. Then you can cut out a piece of copy paper in the same size as your top piece. You can fold that in half and then half again, and then that will give you your lines. You can then mark that at your central point, your top, your bottom, your left and your right, and then that should give you a fairly accurate mark. Once you've done that, you can pierce your holes like you see me doing now and drawing those or tracing those marks onto your material. Once you've done that, you can then use an awl or a drill device or whatever it is that you have around to basically make these holes for you. I cut my pieces from 1.5mm plyboard, and then I cut out one piece with the 5 holes and one with a single hole for the top. So now we need to start putting the table part together. Off camera, I cut down the bottom half of that toothpick, and then these are my 3 elements. So I did redesign one of the pieces for this one, and I cut out the 4 circular pieces at the end, because putting this part together, believe me when I say it was frustrating. It really took me a long time. This glue does glue fast, but with all the pieces together and holding them together, it was very, very irritating. So I redesigned it, and it went far more smoothly. Then I cut down some toothpicks to size. This one does stand slightly taller than my original one, because on the Professor Okio stargazing tower, that is a very, very short room, a very short roof, so I did need to make that a little bit shorter than normal. Then using the tacky glue, I put a small drop in each of the 4 leg holes, and then I placed those into place. The whole time trying to keep them splayed outwards just a little bit. I didn't want them to glue completely pointing upwards, because I do want to have that slightly splayed leg for, you know, maybe for balance or something like that. I feel like that could make sense. And then this part, I applied the tacky glue, and this was still annoying. Like, don't get me wrong, this was still annoying, but compared to how it was when I was using just a regular ring, it was yeah, it was so much better. So if you do make one of these, I would say have your patience hat on if you are just going to use just a slightly larger circle, because it can be very frustrating. You could also use this same technique to create a stool, and I did just that for Professor Okio's tower, and I used some miniature dollhouse spindles as the legs instead. Now I can attach the telescope to its stand, and I'm just gluing that into place with the tacky glue. The top of the telescope isn't particularly heavy, and everything stays balanced and even quite well. And then this piece is a small metal bead which I'm adding as the weight for the telescope. It just so happens that the inner diameter of this particular bead is 2mm, the same as the toothpick, so that fits really nice, and I'm just sticking it down with that tacky glue. Now this is the end product of, in terms of the build anyway, of the telescope. So all that I need to do now is paint everything black as my base coat, and then I can start to paint it. So to colour the telescope, I am using, first of all, a base layer of this nail varnish top coat. I don't actually have any metallic paints. I have the odd random powder, and I do have some copper paint, but for this I do want it to be metallic. So to get that metallic finish, I'm actually using some metallic nail powders. They're a chrome powder. The blue colour which you see in the top left corner is the one which I used on the original telescope. I couldn't decide if I wanted to have this telescope in that same colour blue and have that typical kind of Wanderlust colour scheme going on, but then I decided to go with this beautiful emerald green colour. Green is one of my favourite colours, and I wasn't sorry for using this one. In terms of layers, I think I gave 4 layers of this chrome powder, in between each layer going over with a coat of the nail varnish top coat, and then reapplying that powder, and it really does give such an awesome reflective metallic look. Now, I could have left the green right here and I think it would be absolutely beautiful, but I decided to take this a step further, and so I gave another coat of the top coat, and now I am using these Let's Resin, what are they called? They are chameleon flakes, I think they're called, and basically they give that same metallic look, but they have multiple colors in them, and one of the most prominent colors in this particular bottle which I'm using is actually green, but in different lights they shimmer like a bluish color, a pinkish color, a purplish color, and I think it just elevates that color. Just, oh, it's beautiful. When you look at it here, it looks absolutely beautiful. For a mixture of texture, I'm going to paint the shelf and this top part here as though they are wood. And I think that with the metallic and then having the gold areas and the wood together, it gives it a really nice vintage kind of feel to it. I didn't want to go modern with this telescope. I didn't want to have the aluminium legs and that type of feel, so I wanted to keep it slightly vintage as that fits the kind of theme of my house. Now, this green stuff product is something new to me. I've seen someone using it on YouTube fairly recently and it is awesome. It covers anything. You can paint this on metal, on plastic, on wood, and the chrome finish of it is so reflective. Like, I could actually see my reflection in the one which I made for myself. I could actually see my reflection in the bead. It is awesome. It does take a while for it to dry or for it to set though. You need a few hours to let that cure, and then all that is left to do is add the resin and the telescope is complete. So this video is now coming to its end, and if you would like to own this telescope, all that you have to do is make sure that you are subscribed to my channel, give the video a like and leave me a comment. And on Saturday the 11th of May 2024, I shall pick a name at random and I shall post this telescope out to you. So as always, thank you for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and I shall see you soon. Bye.